Hello everyone, welcome to Human Sphere History. This is going to be our video on the faction Haqqislam. Now, I know I'm going to mess up a lot of the names and I'm going to mispronounce a lot of stuff. So please bear with me. So, to talk about Haqqislam, we're going to have to talk a little bit about its founding and how it came about. The creator of Haqqislam, or the New Islam, by far the most significant Muslim doctrine in the sphere, was a seemingly drab and insignificant man who, in 10 short years, managed to build the foundation for the resurgence of Islam as a relevant world power. His name was Farhad Qadaivar. Qadaivar always labeled himself a messenger, never a prophet. He vehemently rejected the notion that he should be worshipped in any way whatsoever. His sudden death at the age of 42, caused by a violent terrorist attack orchestrated by the Imam Khalif Ibn Ahmad, made him into a martyr of the Haqqislamite cause. The history of Haqqislam dedicates little time to this person. In Qadaivar's own words, only the message and not the messenger is of consequence. Qadaivar gave the Muslims of his time the hope, despite the difficulties inherent in communicating that message to such a heterogeneous and fatalistic group of people. The core of the Haqqislamite doctrine is the book, the Quran. Qadaivar intended to free Muslims from the tyranny of religious leaders and ignorance used as a tool of oppression. He wanted the pride of being Muslim to be based on rationality and not fanaticism. He wanted Muslim people to achieve the prosperity of the Western world without renouncing their faith. To achieve this, he embraced the Quran and rejected all hadith, sunnah, or ijma, all traditional precepts of Islam law. He also rejected the principle of divine inspiration that gave imams their authority. Instead, the Quran and knowledge itself would be the beating hearts of the new Islam. Qadaivar intended to return Islam to its former splendor as a champion of knowledge and arts. The magnificence of the great caliphates and paradisical gardens of Al-Andalus were his inspiration. He dreamed of a wealthy, prosperous Islam that was the envy of the sphere, and believed he could use the grand ideals of the Quran as the foundation of a modern community that was also spiritually wealthy, driving away the ghosts of economic and theological poverty. From his point of view, without a democratic humanistic reform like the one set forth by Haqqislam, the traditional Islamic world would always leave the door open to abuse at the hands of tyrant and corrupt clerics in the name of religion. In his own words, oppressive regimes create toxic societies that produce and export nothing but hate, fear, and ignorance, the three greatest enemies of faith. Muslims must abandon the reactionary teachings of clerics and allow themselves to be guided by no one but their only sacred book, the Quran. The principal interest of Qadaivar was to provide the Haqqislamite movement with a voice and an easily definable theoretical training. He knew his ideas would face spiteful opposition and wanted his ideas to be accessible to even uneducated Muslims. In theological matters, the rich man knows as much as the poor man. By making them both understand, you have already walked half the way. This is the reason why the main works of Qadaivar, the quietness of the soul and the springtime of intellect, were so accessible to the general public. Qadaivar was a born educator and a good salesman, and he made sure everyone could understand the sources of his knowledge, the universe he studied, the paradise he awaited, and the God he worshipped. The ascent of the Haqqislamite movement came in a time of great historical transcendence for Islam as a religion. The second half of the 21st century saw the crystallization of a plethora of new interpretations of Islamic philosophy and theology, as well as the rebirth of Sufism. It was a time of great achievements and cultural advances for Islam, and more specifically, the new Haqqislamite doctrine. Instead of dodging the great debates, Haqqismites threw themselves into theological fray and became voracious adversaries of the more reactionary imams and scholars of traditional Islam. They had no other option if they wanted to win over the hearts and minds of a majority of Muslims. Inside the Haqqislam movement itself, two complementary schools of thought helped enrich the official Haqqislamite doctrine. Muslimites pushed for a rationalist view of Islamic doctrine, while the so-called philosophers influenced by Sufism wanted a more metaphysical approach that nonetheless rejected the idea of divine inspiration embraced by the imams of traditional Islam. The intellectual and material dimensions of the Haqqislamite program required the help of a large group of well-trained thinkers, economists, writers, and publicists, converting in the very short span of time a huge number of Muslims from all walks of life to the Haqqislamite truth. Qadaivar had a gift for communicating with the rich and powerful, earning their trust and funding from the very beginning. The great Muslim tycoons wanted to see their geopolitical relevance restored, and Qadaivar sold them the Haqqislamite revolution as an investment in a prosperous future, free of the stigma of fanatical and bigoted religions of the way of the past. Qadaivar's message conquered the mass media of his time: television, cinema, radio, the press, the global data network. He was able to gain a large number of disciples from amongst political and economic elites. Through his campaigns, he captivated, seduced, and educated millions of new followers, and discredited, ridiculed, and ruined any vocal religious opposition. Al-Hamdini and his work were fuel for the fire he started by Qadaivar's ideas. Haqqislam was gaining ground as the economic and religious world power. Marketing was the silken glove for the words of Haqqislam used to conquer the Muslim people. Despite the support of powerful people and wealthy benefactors, the Haqqislamite movement faced direct opposition from followers of traditional Islam at every turn. Haqqislamite disciples were persecuted in Islamic countries where the only enforced laws were religious in nature. Even the governments of stable, democratic Islamic countries eyed the Haqqislamite movement with suspicion and were wary of its mounting power. The increasing threat of political and religious powers prompted many of Haqqislam's followers to dream of a nation where they could build a society based upon Haqqislamite principles, a beacon of prosperity and tolerance that would serve as a model of values of the humanist Islam to the rest of humanity. This country could not be on earth. Territory for them to create an independent nation was needed from somewhere else. Haqqislamites needed a new place to call their own. The first candidates were orbital colonies and domed lunar and Martian territories, but the investment needed per colonist was too great, and Haqqislam had many followers to relocate. Engaging in the space race alongside Pan-Oceania and Eugene would have been ideal, but without their vast resources, finding the right place was a matter of chance. Haqqislam needed a place to start looking. The answer, and this is a really cool part, the answer actually came from Sufi astronomers. The sacred city of Jerusalem is home to the Dome of the Rock, built around the spot from which, according to Islamic tradition, Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, once ascended to the heavens, superposed following in the prophet's footsteps. They recreated the position of the stars in the firmament over Jerusalem on the night of the ascension, and determined the appropriate quadrant of space over the mosque. Cross-checking the star chart against contemporary ones, they were able to determine the current location of that quadrant. To conduct a thorough exploration of that quadrant, Haqqislam hired the services of NASA. By that time, American Space Agency was in dire need of funding after successive U.S. economic crises. NASA had the necessary facilities, functional if slightly archaic, and had expert staff. Haqqislam agreed to provide all necessary funding in addition to a sizable group of scientific personnel. After a long series of failed attempts, and when the viability of the project was being questioned, a stable wormhole connecting to a promising system was located. The Nyala probe found a system formed by a Sol-type star and 4 planetary bodies, one of which was fit for colonization if slightly too close to the star. Discovery of this system, which was called Bourak after the prophet's horse, was interpreted as proof of the legitimacy of Haqqislamite movement. The success of Haqqislam was no longer a fluke or a clever marketing campaign. The movement reached critical mass. 012 recognized the new nation and its territory, and in Islamic countries not under the control of religious authorities, the number of adherents skyrocketed. Everyone wanted a ticket to Bourak. The inhabitable planet's orbit was too close to the sun, called Fridat, precious gem. The average temperature was high, and most of its land masses were between the planet's tropics. The planet did not seem to welcome settlers with open arms. Life on Bourak promised to be challenging, but living on Bourak was not too different from living in many of the countries Haqqislamites hailed from. In the words of colonists, Allah is wise. Would he expect peoples of the desert to inhabit a tundra planet? Agronomists and environmental engineers were in high demand for the colonization process. The task of the planetary group was to turn Bourak into the promised paradise. To achieve that goal, they favored evolutionary change over more aggressive methods, and built a chain of terraforming towers, or T2s, that worked uninterruptingly across the whole planet. This system produces small incremental changes in a planet's climate and biosphere. The process is slow, but more predictable and less harsh on the planet. The aim of the Academy of Planetology is to transform Bourak into the likeness of the living gardens of old Al-Anadinos, or the long-lost Nineveh, or the gardens of Babylonia. To facilitate the colonization process, semi-abandoned American space stations were brought and repurposed as communication network with Earth. The United States had given up on the space race for economic reasons and welcomed the income in exchange for their orbital installations. With them came a sizable percentage of NASA staff who applied for Haqqislamite citizenship, some even converting to the faith. The areas with milder climate received the higher population, while the most arid regions became home to planetologists and those who preferred a nomadic lifestyle. Bourak took some conquering, but Haqqislam managed to tame it with the twin reins of science and philosophy. Alright, so now that we've talked a little bit about how Bourak came to be, let's talk more about Haqqislam itself. Haqqislam is a united power, but at the same time it is also a state formed by both faithful to Allah and the seekers of knowledge from all over the human sphere. As a reflection of this variety, the planet Bourak is divided into 2 different democratic, semi-autonomous regions that each have characteristic idiosyncrasies and clearly differentiated features. The Sultanate Funqua, the strong Ottoman influence, is the most cosmopolitan region and has the most ethnic cultural diversity on the planet because it is Bourak's gateway to the stars and the headquarters of the great interstellar trade empires. The Caliphate of Al-Medinate, of Arab majority, is the great cultural reserve of Bourak, home to universities that exemplify the search for knowledge as a means to research Allah, as well as the powerful Haqqislam medical, biotechnical, and pharmaceutical industries. A casual observer may be surprised by a fragmented character of the Haqqislamite army, its wide division into semi-autonomous military forces with very disparate operating and organizational profiles. And what will likely be even more surprising is what extraordinary global efficiency of their Sword of Allah and its capacity to act cohesively under the orders of the Haqqislamite High Command. Since the earliest days of Haqqislam's existence as a state, the Diwan al-Hachib, the ministerial office of the presidency, became aware of the existence of very powerful underlying forces in each of the different regions of Bourak, These forces had such a great capacity to influence that they were able to alter and mold state politics to function in favor of their own ambitions. The brotherhoods of merchants and the great lords of the Silk Sultanate of Funqua, the biohealth corporations and the medical pharmaceutical industries of the Caliphate of Al-Medinate, and the financial centers of the Shahnate and the sinister Hassassin Society hidden in the desert of Iran, Zat al-Amat, as well as the silk production centers of the Kairazig mafias and the Kadnant Gabquar. See, I told you I'd have to pronounce a lot of crazy stuff. Each one of them alone possessed sufficient influence to divert the general policy of Haqqislamite government. The Al-Hachib would grant each region a certain degree of freedom and autonomy, but it would introduce a factor of competitiveness amongst them, intensifying the game of political intrigue, allowing them to compete with each other to try to obtain primacy in the area of government and influence, permitting them to watch over each other so that they may wonder what the others are plotting and who will bare their throats to this political adversary. Allowing them to compete for the attention of the interests of Al-Hachib, allowing them to weaken through internal strife, thus allowing Al-Hachib autonomy and maintaining its authority. And this situation is also reflected in their armed forces. Each region has an army of corps that rivals all others, always trying to stand out before the high command when acting alone, and giving their best in joint operations. The effectiveness of this method is clearly evidenced by the high standards of efficiency of the Haqqislamite army, which, in spite of its fragmented nature, always remains under the strict control of the command, and with it, the Al-Hachib. To understand and explain the success and vitality of the Haqqislamite trade, one must remember the maxim from the beginning of space. Space belongs to those who sail through it. Thanks to the intensive application of this motto, there are few who can currently compete with the lucrative Haqqislamite mercantile businesses. Haqqislamite commercial activities related to space have always been characterized by their long-term planning, consistency and thoroughness being developed throughout the human sphere. Some analysts have suggested that the success obtained by Haqqislam should not be attributed to so much the assassin commandos, but rather to their commercial space agents, worthy heirs to the spirit of Sinbad the Sailor. During the colonization phase of Bourak, transportation of settlers from Earth and the materials necessary for establishing their settlement and terraforming the new planet became a critical issue. Based on the infrastructures and facilities and the staff available from NASA that had been abandoned by its government in crisis, various corporations linked to the Haqqislamite movement created space transportation routes that covered the transportation needs of the colonization project. The massive flow of people and material towards Bourak changed the colonization race into a booming business. However, once the central colonization phase was completed, the sharp decrease in the number of settlers sent most of the space transportation fleet into dry dock. Expert eyes quickly spotted a new lucrative business, low-cost inter-system commercial transport. The Haqqislamite fleet could not compete directly with Pan-Oceania and Eugene. The alternative was to offer low, very accessible prices to a corresponding lower level of service. The transportation giants from the great powers offered more luxurious, faster, and comfortable trips, but considerably more expensive, making space travel available to only a select few. For that reason, the democratizing Haqqislamite proposal was received with enthusiasm by the masses, and the Haqqislamite cargo and passenger carriers prospered, becoming the choice for many tourists and businessmen. The most lucrative aspect of Haqqislamite trade is linked to the silk trade. No other commercial product generates such high levels of economic movement as silk, both in its pure form as well as synthetic derivatives obtained from it. The entire fabric of resurrection system, fundamental basis of the contemporary society, depends on the flow of silk that can only be obtained from Bourak. The power derived from this converts Haqqislam into a power with a specific influence in international community. The silk trade is one of the most lucrative businesses in the sphere. To that end, the merchants who control the silk trade are the richest, most powerful, and influential in all the Haqqislamite society. These tycoons are one of the pillars of the Haqqislam economy in medical, pharmaceutical, tourism, and luxury export interests. Unfortunately, the interests of the great silk tycoons also include the Sultanate itself. This organization is a democratic, political, bureaucratic institution that is, however, inevitably controlled from the shadows by these magnates. Although the Sultan is chosen by the people in a democratic and transparent elections, all candidates receive the support from the sponsorship from some faction of the Silk Consortium, which will be necessarily favored once in power. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
The silk must flow.
The silk must flow.
He who controls the silk controls the universe.
So next we're going to talk about the two sub-factions of Haqqislam. The Qapu Khalqi and the Assassin. So first, the Qapu Khalqi. The old Turkish Empire, whose sovereign was called the Sultan, was also known by the nickname the Door, because it was the main access point to Asia from Europe. In those times, the body of the army, which functioned as the Palatine Guard, was called the Qapu Khalqi, the people of the Door. This evocative name has been inherited by the military section of the Sword of Allah, which depends on the Sultanate of Funqua, because it constitutes the protective force for the orbital elevator, astroports, caravansaries, and orbitals, basically the access routes to Bourak. The Qapu Khalqi is a military force with a double vocation, naval and security. The main responsibility of the Sultanate is the protection of commerce in the silk trade, and the section of Haqqislamite army subordinated to this organization clearly fulfills that function. The Qapu Khalqi is responsible for managing a large part of the Haqqislamite Navy and very important shared influence in the Space Admiralty. On the other hand, all regular units created under the military command dependent upon the Sultanate have a specific training in military matters of security, protection, and the fight against terrorism. Where the presence of the Qapu Khalqi is most evident is in the so-called Silk Road, the path of the maglev train that crosses half of Bourak, from the capital of Gabkar, center of silk production, all the way to the orbital elevator of the astroport Dar el Funqua. The responsibility of the Qapu Khalqi begins with the loading of the silk at the output station of Kivakala, but it is in the desolate territory of the desert of Azar, the perfect place for an ambush where the danger is greatest. To assault the high-velocity maglev, a high level of the organizational capacity is required, which means that the adversaries of the Qapu Khalqi will be very well prepared professionals and not mere gunslingers. Conscious of this reality, the deployments of Qapu Khalqi run the length of the Silk Road and tend to boast effectiveness and forcefulness. But there will always be organizations and even independent operators willing to risk everything for a booty as valuable as their cargo, which is why the Qapu Khalqi cannot allow themselves to lower their guard for even one instant. A particularly distinctive characteristic of the Qapu Khalqi is that it has no difficulty recruiting foreign units to strengthen their offensive and defensive forces. In this way, in addition to the corsair ships, the Qapu Khalqi makes use of the services of professional mercenary troops, which can be used for both land and naval operations. The highly qualified officials of the Al-Qadif military academy know how to get maximum benefit from mercenary forces at their service, making them work together with the regular troops from under their command. The nomad professionalism, the savagery of the Janjan, the chaos of the Bashi Buzak, and the effectiveness of the Kaplan and lethality of the Druze are converted into assets that complement the tactical capabilities and qualities of the Qapu Khalqi. Assassins. A cursed name, a name said with fear. Little is known of the society of assassins, only what they want us to know. Enigmatic and mysterious, they live hidden by the darkest shadows of secrecy. Come with me on this trip, entering into the fogs of the enigma that are the assassin. Theoretically, the Assassin Society is one of the Haqqislamite intelligence agencies, but this definition is inadequate. because it is not used as a government agency, not even within the turbulent world of espionage. The assassin form is a secret criminal sect funded by the Bourak government, whose mission is the defense of the Haqqislamite faith, the search for knowledge, and the metaphysical intellectual illumination as a means of contact with the divine. The assassin society is made up of mystics and scholars obsessed with burying themselves in the idiosyncrasies of truth and reality. They are also fanatical warriors who are willing to give their life for Haqqislam. Philosopher assassins could be their clearest and most precise definition. The assassin have elevated assassination and fighting to a level of an exact science and a way in which to reflect the truth of knowledge. The assassin possesses a sense of community as strong as it is sectarian, based on conspiratorial nature that is traditional amongst those who believe themselves to be in possession of the great secrets of the universe. Old and traditional Islam has dismissed the assassin society as a heretical and its members as being defined as assassins and war criminals by the majority of authorities in the human sphere. Despite the support of Haqqislamite government, the assassin are an internationally hunted group, which is why they prefer to keep their traditions and their doctrines a secret in order to prevent their adversaries from obtaining any type of information that may jeopardize them. The assassin consider it their duty to prevent the interruption of the search of knowledge by the actions of enemy agents. Whoever violates the faith or endangers its fundamental principles is a target of the assassin society. Whoever obstructs the search for knowledge or the development of humanity, whoever promotes or encourages obstruction and ignorance, in whichever place or era of the human sphere, will be considered an enemy of the assassin. The sentence will be quick and execution will be public so that the whole sphere can bear witness to the assassin justice. Fear and murder are the main tools of the assassin trade. The society does not have another form of existence, another greater glory, another slated objective, apart from its metaphysical knowledge, than death. Murder as a means of intervention in political, scientific, intellectual life is the primary modus operandi of the assassin sect. Once its mysterious leader, the old man on the mountain, determines who is the enemy of Haqqislam, his followers embark on a campaign to publicly kill that person. The assassins kill without scruples, without remorse, following a more logical and complete process than any other known metaphysical system. It is perhaps the most prodigious and lethal criminal phenomenon that the security forces of the human sphere must face. At present, the assassin sect is a vast organization that spans the most important points of the human sphere. The assassin have dispersed throughout all known territories, establishing tenuous networks of support and information, and also layers and safe houses from which they can operate. Its members, distributed throughout various levels of initiation, are subject to a strict and severe moral code. The commitment to their protection of knowledge and the development of human society is all-encompassing. But these assassins are not just moralists, but also priests, artists, instructors, and propagandists. In fact, renowned authors have been among their ranks. Within their own grade or level, all members of society possess a concrete mission in addition to their personal quest for knowledge, a mission which is vital to maintaining the perfect operation of the sect. Many are nothing more than informants, others are dedicated to recruiting. The most educated instruct new recruits, and the most capable, in addition to opening new avenues in metaphysical pursuit, monitor the emergence of new threats amongst Haqqislam and human knowledge. In the name of the old man, and in service to the faith of the Al-Hachib. Assassin field operatives, the true assassins, are expert fighters in various combat techniques, as fearsome as they are accurate. Each operative has a different degree of initiation within the society, but they are all lethal demons who believe themselves angels. When their time comes, the assassin die quiet and proud, complying with the strict principles of their cult. Nothing disturbs them. They always sleep peacefully, immersed in the sleep of the righteous. As an assassin, they maintain their own excellence and justify the most horrific acts as being for the higher good, dictated by the heavens, and that they are nothing more than mere instruments. So that was a little bit about Haqqislam. As I always say, I will be going into each section and each faction deeper after I get them all, kind of an overview of them all done. If you like tabletop gaming, comics, laughing, or any of those, you can check out our tabletop gaming channel, the Tabletop Talkers, that's with a Z. If you like the Iron Kingdoms and War Machine and are interested in its lore, then check out our other channel, Allocating Focus. That's it for this week. If you'd like to hear about any other faction, any of the ones we haven't touched on yet, I believe Nomads, Toa, and the Combine, leave a comment and I'll try and do that one next. Until next time.